record. Welcome everybody. This is our session for digital transformation. This is part of a three-part series, and specifically today's session is role of analytics in digital transformation. I always try to do a plug for Mate Talks. I want to make sure you guys have a chance to check us out online, matetalks.com. It's really a safe space, or like a community rather, obviously currently online because that's our life right now, but we'd love to have you join us, participate in the future, be on the panel, come up with new topics, and just really grow the community. I'm also super excited, besides the Zoom mess up, and I'll take full responsibility to present the group today. So by now, if you've participated before, you're familiar with Padma, and I'll talk a bit about her, but it's a powerhouse in my opinion. I can't stop talking about the fact that I have three wonderful women who are here to share their experiences as part of the panel. So let me go ahead and introduce them so we can begin. So Padma has worked for several Fortune 500 companies as a senior technology executive, and she's got extensive experience in all aspects of data science, enterprise architecture, digital technology, roadmap, e-commerce, robotic process automation, and digital strategy, leading global teams with digital transformation agenda. She currently advises clients and upcoming companies in supply chain analytics and digital transformation. We also have Nirmala Ann. Nirmala began her career in banking and transitioned into information technology. She's currently working in the role of chief architect at a Tata Consulting Services in America. Her focus is on financial services. Nirmala has over 20 years of diverse client engagement and has worked with big corporations such as Morgan Stanley, Marriott, Bank of America, and so on. So she's got wonderful experience. And we also have Sravanti, and Sravanti has worked in the media, entertainment, and communications Fortune 500 companies for the past 15 plus years in various analytical, financial, and business management roles. She's got extensive experience in data analytics, performance management, and driving results through instilling a testing discipline and managing the right metrics. Her entrepreneurial, innovative mindset and passion for using technology and data to solve marketing problems created many successes for the companies she's worked for. So thank you, ladies. Welcome. Let me go ahead and make sure that I get the presentation started so Padma can go ahead and begin. So give me 1 second as I share my screen. Here we go. And then let me know when you're able to see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Shravanti and Nirmala, for joining the panel. I'm looking forward to a very lively discussion on this topic. So for those of you who have joined our first and second session, this whole four-part series talks about digital transformation and different aspects of that transformation. And one of the key things that we presented in our first meeting when we discussed about strategy was how does analytics, why is analytics in the center of this transformation? So can you scroll to the next slide? So if you look at it, we talked about why strategy roadmap is important, automation is important, and why information management is extremely important in this process. So, and plus the planning and execution, how it should, how the transformation should go on. So today we are going to predominantly focus on information management and analytics. And it's a very vast topic, and it is very structured to the desires and needs of a company when they talk about digital transformation. In our previous two sessions, we have repeatedly emphasized that the enterprise goal is extremely important when it comes to transformation. What does transformation mean is very unique for each organization. It's not one size fits all. So when we look at information management, we have to look at what is the analytics value structure. How does that look like? And how should that be driven? So when you look at like, an enterprise value creation, analytics value creation structure, it's a two-way conversation. And many times, like when you look at companies, they tend to become either too IT centric, or they to become too marketing centric, or they become too business centric. And in this conversation, what happens is when you have a strategy that is very structured to either technology or just to operations or just to marketing, and there is no back and forth feedback between technology, the information that's being transmission through this technology to serve a business goal, it becomes a very tricky transformation to accomplish. So first and foremost, companies need to make sure that their business goal is defined. What are you trying to generate by bringing in analytics? What value does that add? You will see several times organizations will go through this process of, there is so much conversation about analytics, BI, AI, VR, AR, all these components, and they just jump on the bandwagon without understanding how is this going to benefit? How is this going to increase your revenue or stabilize cost or help in retention and acquisition of new customers? So that is why business strategy has to be very clearly defined, and how are we going to achieve these business goals? That comes analytics. The component that is extremely critical in this process is setting up the key KPIs. How are these business goals being measured? How are these strategies being effective? That has to be equally measured. And that is supported by a very strong technology platform and data integration. So when we talk about data integration, the heart and soul of analytics, whether it is as simple as descriptive analytics or as engaged and robust or bleeding edge as AR or VR, is data. If the data in its rawest form is not what exactly you need to accomplish your goal, it's a very treacherous road to tread to achieve your goals. So let's talk a little bit about how does the data structure look like? How should the data strategy be played? So once an organization has made a decision of having analytics as part of their digital transformation agenda, the first and foremost thing they need to do is come up with a data strategy. Anya, next slide. So when you're looking at the data strategy, one of the key components is, what does your data ecosystem look like? And the visual that you have in front of you is at a very high level. But what I have tried to accomplish in this process is, how do we make sure that the whole transition, how do I make sure that the whole journey of their data is available? So depending on the genre of the business, you might not need real-time data. You just need immediate data, right? So you don't need everything to be predicted or everything to be analyzed at a real time, but you definitely need it near time. So the timeliness of that data becomes extremely important. The infrastructure or the platforms that are processing these data sources, whether it is coming from your POS system for a retailer or your online website for retailers who are predominantly on .com, or both, or it is coming from your plants when you are looking at supply chain analytics. How is all these data components are streamed in and processed? That processing, having a data model and processing that data, whether it's structured, unstructured, text, social media data, any genre of data, it becomes a very critical component of how successful your analytics initiative is going to be. And one of the key components that you want to eventually drive as an organization is how do you change the decision-making process? So the ultimate goal of transformation is transformation of business. And how is the business going to transform is how, the way you utilize this data to inform decisions that you would have otherwise not made or would have treaded very carefully. So the story that data is trying to tell you, understanding that story becomes very important. And the key component of analyzing that story becomes how accurately do you pick your data. So you have this misconception in the industry is the volume of the data defines defines the insights that the data is going to produce. That is not necessarily true. The depth of the data definitely defines how granular the insights can be or should be. And it is very driven by the business goals as well. So as I said, understanding your data source is extremely important. Having a very nimble data ecosystem where you have an ability to pull all this data, integrate data, build data models, and have a very solid governance structure over that data, and have a very clear understanding of how the output of this data, whether these are predictive models or analytical applications, or you are trying to do text analytics or anything, how does that tie back up to the business goal or the business strategy that you're trying to achieve? Next slide. So let's talk about how does the maturity look like? And all of you who are looking into this space, who are already in this space, can definitely put your company in this maturity track wherever the company sits. And before we can even get into descriptive analytics, there are a lot of companies that are still operating on standard reports. Those are not even descriptive. They are just an output of data that kind of gives you a trend of how the business is transitioning. So when your company is at that position where it is looking at reporting and thinking, this is what is be all or end all, or they are looking at that component of information and using that to guide business strategies, it is more on a gut at that level or an experience on that level. As you mature, as you decide and say, hey, I want to take analytics as a transformation agenda, and as you move forward with that, the first step usually you have to start looking at at a more microscopic level and understand what has happened. And looking at, when you look at what has happened, one might argue and say, oh, you know what, when I'm getting reporting, I'm looking at what has happened. How is that different than descriptive analytics? And that's where it gets the granularity comes into play. It basically tells you what are your trends. If you're looking at, let's take an example of sales data. If you're looking at trend lines, what is your median sale? What is the trajectory of sales? How is it looking? Where are the blips in your data that you can identify that are causing the trend to change, or there are such micro trends that you cannot identify them in a report? And that's what descriptive analytics does and diagnostic analytics does. It basically looks at what has happened. And then you will start looking at what is going to be, what is going to happen. You take your historical information, you start predicting trends. You start looking at a prediction of whether it's a sales forecast, whether it is marketing impression forecast, or whatever you're trying to forecast, trying to understand that of what is happening, and plan with looking at these data models and saying, okay, this is a probability of happening, and this is how I should structure my business strategy to achieve my business goals. Same thing happens with prescriptive analytics, where it's not only what is happening, how do you react to it as a company? And the more mature model is looking at, like, self-learning algorithms, cognitive, which is where your AR, VR, all those components come into play. Next slide. So let's talk about what are the key challenges. At a surface level, it does look like, in theory, this looks like a very doable exercise, which it is. However, there are a lot of gotchas when you are looking at this structure. And when you are saying analytics is going to be my agenda for digital transformation, analytics can be a very broad and very big initiative for an organization. So that's why it's very important for the business goals to be clearly defined and say, how is this analytics going to change my strategy, how I go to market, how I position my products, how do I structure innovation, how do I look at my digital dollars, how am I spending my digital funds, or as like, how is my plant working, how's the operation in a given plant going, that I can forecast the production of units of products, and how much efficiency can I bring into the operational thing. So depending on what is your business goal and strategy, that has to be very clearly defined, and which is an underpinning of this entire initiative. Understanding the data needs. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to understand the data needs. It doesn't, if you have more data, doesn't mean you're going to get a lot of insights. You have to have the right data, and you have to have a very clear understanding of who, what, when, where. And once you have those components in the data, you will be set very rightly to move forward with your agenda. Data quality, very important component. Just because there is a big conversation, especially in the CPG industry, about the velocity of data. Just because you have huge velocity in data, that necessarily does not mean the data has to be good data. The quality, the gaps in the data, you should have an ability to impute data if you need to. There should be clear trending in the data. Data cannot be patchy. It has to be on the same level. So there are a lot of components on data quality, and you should pretty much meet most of them to have a decent quality of data. As I said, data latency is huge, because if the insights are given you way after an event has happened, it's kind of pointless at that point. So, so understanding the data latency, what does it mean for your company? And again, it is very custom to each organization and each initiative that you're trying to deploy. Talent. As you and I all know, there is a huge lack of or scarcity of talent in this space. People who know what actually, how can they actually wrangle data? How can they look at small anomalies and not necessarily pick on outliers? So it's mostly understanding the signal from the craziness of all this noise. Infrastructure, very important, having a very stable infrastructure and a very integrated technology landscape. One of the key components that companies tend to miss, especially legacy companies who have had systems and processes in place for several decades, they do fall into this trap of not having a very integrated landscape, and that eventually leads into data latency or incompleteness of data or data quality issues. So it's very important that the infrastructure integration and a solid infrastructure is in place, and it's mapped out before the initiative has started and becomes a key pillar. When it becomes like, when you say analytics is going to be one of my key pillars for my transformation. And again, testing and learning. it is very important for you to have a very strong testing strategy. It is not like, set it and forget it kind of agenda. You have to learn with every step of it, because especially people who have been in data science world or who have been in analytics world will say this. When you approach a problem and you start working on data, you have to change your approach umpty number of times before you arrive at the right answer, before your statistical model has enough significance that it can be deployed. So testing, learning is extremely important, as it in any digital space, to test and learn constantly. So what does this mean? What does analytics capability in digital transformation? What are the key things that we want to keep in mind when we are looking at putting this capability in the company? Transformation is not a destination, it's a journey. I have been saying this since the beginning. Change in thinking, how you approach a decision-making process. Is it data-driven? There is so much buzzword about data-driven decision-making. Pretty much everybody says it, but in my experience, I have seen very handful of companies who actually implement it, who actually live by the words of like leading with data. Strategy, extremely important. Data strategy that marries with your business strategy is extremely important. Understanding, having a realistic understanding of your maturity roadmap. Where do you want to go? You will see the minute there is a conversation about digital transformation, people jump into let's get AR. That's the most happening thing. And you are, as an organization, you're necessarily not ready for that, or you probably don't have the people who can ingest and process that information and make decisions, and you probably don't have the infrastructure to support that. Transition plan, how are you going to bring your people along? How are you going to bring your systems along? How are you going to bring your processes along so you can aid this digital transformation journey? So as you know, with every presentation, I ended with a quote, and this is for this presentation, and I would like to open it up for questioning, because I think the two panelists we have so much information to give and such a great knowledge, repository of knowledge. I would like to further this conversation with them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Padma. I appreciate that. I'm going to stop sharing so we can focus on the speakers and just really talk about. So we have a few questions that are presented. I also just want to encourage all of the participants, as in the folks that are invited or are participating as attendees. Feel free to ask, unmute yourself. You can chat or whatever you'd like and ask the panel. But I'll start with the first question that we have. We wanted to sort of get us started on is, can one of you ladies talk a bit about the hurdles in actually implementing analytics? In your specific world or the organizations you've worked with, and you don't have to name them, is analytics even part of your digital agenda?
Yes, I can talk about a little bit about that. Core part of digital transformation, and as evolution, financial services have been driven toward analytics as a core technology enabler. For example, expansion of marketing and customer insights and conversational commerce. The hurdles include getting started, focused on bringing available data together to determine what questions should be asked or find relationships. Connecting siloed data is a start, but not good enough. And Padma, I really loved the presentation that you made so far. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you, Nirmala. Travanti, how about you? Can you share any thoughts about some of the hurdles that you may have experienced?
Yeah, I mean, in implementing analytics, it's like an everyday challenge, right? You're always testing and optimizing, and being analytics part of a digital agenda, like as Padma mentioned, it's a journey and not a destination. And when you are constantly going through it by step, and you are at crossroads and you don't know which road to take, that is when your analytics can give you some kind of direction, which path to go down, right? You send you split your traffic or your volumes, and you see which one is performing better, and then you pick that. And that's where you constantly bring in your testing discipline, where where big decisions and impactful um, decisions have to be taken. And some things you roll out. And the beauty about the digital space is it's very quick turnarounds. It doesn't have long lead times like um, a direct mail or a long trial that you put in market. It gives you some um, agileness, some fast to market, fast to change, make decisions around analytics. So descriptive and diagnostic, I think, as Padma showed, the going up the ladder, um, getting the organization behind the descriptive, getting the organization behind the diagnostic, that would be one of the first steps, I think. Everybody embracing it and seeing the value. So it depends a lot on analytics, how they bring out that value. Are there hurdles? Yes, because um, sometimes testing means you have to slow it down. You have a deadline to meet. But in the end, that's the right thing to do. So it's a balance.
Thank you.
And to add to that real quick, sometimes I think, like, the other piece that you run into in when organizations are going through like digital transformation or have an analytics agenda is the perception versus reality. There is this perception that the tech industry or the product owners or the environment has created, and that perception usually falls very it's a very grandiose idea of what analytics can do. People think it can cook you breakfast. It actually cannot. And it's a very iterative, step by step. It's more about progress, not perfection. And having like organization come to that realization of saying, this is my agenda, this is the best first step we can take, is very critical. And bringing your entire leadership to that conversation becomes extremely important, because these kind of culture changes, strategies usually trickle down.
I completely agree. I think that's an excellent point about like this having being the magic sauce, and it's up to the digital owner or whoever manages that digital aspect to coach and make the organization learn that it is a process and it's a step-by-step process, right? Like if it has to go overnight and give you all these benefits, uh, I wish we can do that, but that's not how that's not reality. That's just an expectation. And when you fall short of expectation, that's where you have disappointments, you don't meet the goals. It's definitely a learning experience because most organizations have this roadmap and think that, yes, like we have 20 steps to complete, 20 sprints, we get there. But what we don't understand is after the first two sprints, maybe the results will be so different that your next 20 are out of the water.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's a very hard thing. I don't know if there is a clear answer, but apart from you as a leader having that foresight and saying, these are the possibilities and this is all the ways the project can go. So be ready. But if it goes this way, we are going to take this path, and coaching them that it's an iterative process. the only goal we will need is this next 2-3 steps, right?
It sounds a lot like both of you are saying also it's about the journey. Although I know we're all aiming for a destination, that journey is dependent on each individual step. It's not a clear path. You might have to alter your path depending on each step that you're taking. That's what it sounds like. So thank you both.
Yeah.
And Marmala, I will go ahead and ask the next question of the panel. I want to dive a little bit into what a lot of people consider the sexiness of analytics. So how often did you see leadership jump to AI or ML solutions without really understanding or even a proper roadmap for analytics implementation? And can you talk a little about the risk of doing that, just jumping ahead and saying, let's go with AI and ML, specifically around your leadership?
I can start with that. It's mostly like, it is definitely the buzzword, right? Everybody wants to do that. There are benefits. Um, um, I think one of the fundamental questions is it necessary? And is your organization able to act based on the uh, decisions and the recommendations the AI model puts out, right? There are three very, very important hurdles there. One is the explainability. How much of the model can you explain? When you see a result, how much can you buy in that, yes, it is saying take down these 10 pages. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to shut it down. Like that's what your AI model is telling you. How much as an analyst or how much as an organization can you explain? Like what does that result make sense? Because most of them are like a black box, very deep, um, like cut off, uh, all these data scientists building robust models, right? And second, how practical is it? And if that decision is made on yesterday's data, is it replicable to the future, right? There is a bias. Have you, like, these are three distinct buckets, I think. Like, it's not only AI or ML, any model, right? When you look at a result, okay, it's what the data has been modeled and your decision has been modeled on X amount of data. And is that representative of what is going to happen in the future? Question number one. And second, is it practical to do it? And third, can you explain why it is suggesting what it's doing, right? I think that's where, if you are able to address these three, I think you're on a good path, right? But that's where I think most models fall short, and it is very hard to explain that in layman's terms and make sense out of the decision. But that doesn't mean you should not do it, right? Like there are certain aspects you can implement because you trust it more, and there are certain parts you can say you can live without. Like how much more will you gain by doing all that?
I remember this thing my professor used to say. It's like analytics is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it and nobody really knows what it is. And everybody thinks everybody is doing it. So everybody claims they are doing it. So I think that's where part of the rub is with the industry made it so fancy. Analytics has become such a fancy word that everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon without understanding their business goals, exactly what Shravanti said, and what are they going to get out of it, and how are they going to process this whole thing. So I agree with you 100%.
So I can add to that, Anya, as well, that I think it helps to have a grounding in business architecture and problem space versus just dive into tech like AI or machine learning. There's an opportunity for us to help leadership make informed decisions to focus on value and simplification. Well, we also have to watch out for complications as different companies use different names, terms, such as AI, ML, or data science. ML can be used for predictive analytics, shift from computation to prediction. So I guess the answer to your question, Anya, is that I see in many cases the leadership tries to fully understand what the problem is, and we have the opportunity to help the leadership make informed decisions.
You made a really good point, Irma. Thank you for bringing that up. I think we see a lot of the terminology being used either incorrectly or exchangeably, right? That everything falls into the same area. So really understanding what's your sort of in English business problem without using the fancy terms is actually really important. I think, Padma, you talked a lot about that during the presentations and even previous ones as well. What are you trying to accomplish? Don't worry about how that will be accomplished. From a business leader's perspective, what are your goals? And then you rely on your team to tell you how they should go ahead and solve for that problem. Don't worry about the UFOs flying in and fixing all that, or whoever who's going to be doing that. So anyways, thank you for that. I think that's a great point. Again, anybody on the call, if you have any thoughts around AI or ML or anything else, feel free to chat, unmute yourself, anything that you want to share with us. I'll go ahead and move on, if there is no additional points on this, to another question, a little maybe more grounded, not as exciting, but how quickly during this process of transitioning and digital transformation did people transition from reporting, just plain old reporting, to predictive analytics based on the organizations that you've worked with?
So an example of change from a data quality org to a data analytics and insights org, but data quality is still at core. And Shananti, if you want to share any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think it is a fundamental factor of stability of the business. If the business is very stable, it doesn't make a lot of changes. You can quickly move from a descriptive and a diagnostic phase to a predictive, right? Reporting is all like stating facts. This is what has happened. This is what is happening. It's all in the past. You're just giving descriptive stats, or this is what I think is happening because of what is happening. Like, it's just diagnostic. It's getting a little bit deeper into the data. Moving to that predictive phase is when your business is stable, when you know that you're at a place where, yes, I think this is how I'm going to be running for the next few months or next few weeks. And let me see what forecast, what volumes, what as simple as like, what is the site traffic going to be, right? But if your business is not stable, then you will be unable to do the prediction because your data will be so noisy, right? You will have garbage in, garbage out, as Padma said. It's like you need to get to a state where your current state or your data set is representative of at least 60% of what's going to happen in the future. That's when you move into a predictive state, right? How quickly? It's completely how well you can capture the data, and is it noisy? It's not noisy. Like, if you see a bunch of random dots, like, there is no way you can predict the future. You have to let it run, because like, what variables, what trends are you going to decipher that will tell you what's going to happen in the future, right? So I think it's not about people, it's about how you set up your business and how stable will you expect it to be and how well you collect your data. That is going to dictate whether you can use something with your data set. And once you have the data set, I think then it is the change management, right? It's up to you to think about, okay, now I have the depth and the breadth of the data. I'm going to make some use of it and build some models. Some organizations, it's very easy because they understand the value of analytics. Some organizations, it's very hard because it's added cost, it's added resources, and they don't see the value. So then you have to do some use cases and then go slowly.
Thank you, Sravanti. I know we have a question from somebody from the attendees, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hey, my name is Ankita, and I just want to say, guys, all the three of you have really enlightened me on this subject and the way the whole digital transformation works within businesses. However, from my perspective, with the current pandemic going on, would love to get an understanding of how leaders are going to change or enable their digital transformation moving forward.
So I'll start.
So,
I'll start on that. So what the digital transformation agenda, what it was before, for a lot of companies, that's not going to remain the same. So your question has changed now drastically because your status quo has changed and now you have to prepare for a new normal. So the companies, in my experience, the companies who were predominantly a CPG, a B2B companies have to start thinking, how do they become B2C? Which is a huge transformation. And I believe deploying predictive analytics is going to be least of their worries at this point. So that has extreme changed drastically. The COVID AI has brought in a mindset of survival, and not only survival at the moment, survival looking futuristically. How will this environment, if we get hit by another pandemic in 2022, God forbid it happens, but if we get it, how are we going to process that? How resilient is my business going to be? So now the operative word has not become pioneer, not beat competition, resiliency. How quickly can I service? So that digital agenda has changed drastically, and that transformation looks a lot different than what it looked 4 months ago.
So I want to just go on the record, Ankita, just really quickly, that while we put this together, we did not anticipate the COVID pandemic. So when Padma had this great idea, we started talking about this, I want to say in January, about putting this together. This is your life's work. And our first event was supposed to be in March in person in New York City. And of course, you know the rest. But through that process, obviously, this has proven to be valuable in a whole different level. And I think what Padma mentioned just now, too, is that when we were putting this together, I think a lot of organizations were looking at that. How do I differentiate myself? How do I compete? And as you just mentioned, Padma, now how do I stay alive? It's a whole different goal at this point, just in the last 3 months or however many, I can't keep track. How long we've been going for. So very timely question. And I don't know that a lot of people even truly have the answer, because we just said this is not an overnight process. So you have to take those baby steps, right? We're at analytics at this point, but obviously some businesses aren't even this far at all. So, and I'll pause. I'm sorry. I thought that was an interesting tidbit and a great question.
Nirmala, you had something to add?
Sure. And thank you, Padma. And yes, that is an interesting point, Anya. Thank you for sharing that. So I would like to also add, it depends on the industry and the domain it is. Some domains are ahead of the curve and some are in the middle of it. And some are now, quickly adapt to the change. And I think as Padma earlier mentioned that what may have been in the timeline, say 5 years from now or 10 years from now, they may have to do it right now. So it all, I think a strong leadership will overcome any constraints. So I do see that multiple businesses will be very successful as long as the tech also just have to chip in and really give options to the leadership.
Sure. Thank you, guys. That was helpful.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome,
the question. Sravanti, did you want to add anything, or should we move on to another question that we have?
We can move on to the next question.
All right. Well, let me ask, again, the panel, how did the decision-making process change in your organization due to the analytics implementation? So, imagine you've actually done some analytics, and what does that mean in terms of decisions? Are you using that information or not? And are you able to be nimble? And I think some of you have already touched on that, but if you can specifically talk to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can start. I think it absolutely changes how we implement, right? Because you're always comparing to a business as usual, you're testing, you're seeing benchmark metrics, and you will bring that data into your decision making. When you put in new, let's say, registration flows, does this work better, or what you have works better? And if it is not working better, why? Can we iterate on it? Can we make it better? Why is the consumer not going through as much, right? Simple metrics, right? Those all will like just make their way into the decision making. And that's crucial because when you are going through a transformation, you want to start at the level you are at, or you want to be higher in terms of your metrics. You don't want to be lower, but how do you how do you get that? It's all analytics. You're looking at your current state, you're comparing it to your new state and seeing where you're off, and you're optimizing those. So it absolutely forays into your decision making process. And we are not talking like all the AI, ML, predictive stuff, right? This is like very basic diagnostic, basic descriptive type of analytics, which gives you rich, powerful information to make your decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sravanti.
I can add to that. Thank you, Shranti. And so I think it's an improvement in terms of how the decision-making process has changed, Anya. Now we see analytics, customer insights at core of business requirements. The challenge also is that how many technologists take time to go back to business and work to improve conditions and business implementation processes. It's a hard problem to solve, but we work through it.
Thank you. That's a good point, right? Sometimes what the results are really require significant change in the organization. Is that actually going to happen, or is that like, oh, that's nice to know? Fatma, anything to add?
No, I agree with both of them. It's as I said, it's a process. And one of the points that Shravanti made initially when she started speaking is that trust, which becomes very critical when there is adoption. Unless you can prove that this is a better process, this is a better insight, this is a better understanding of your current state or what your future state might be, the adoption is a tricky road. So that trust is very critical, and that only comes with the amount of testing you do and the repetitive results you produce, and convince your audience that this is the way to go.
Thank you. I want to be cognizant of the time. We have 3 minutes left. So if there's anybody else who'd like to ask a question, please feel free to unmute. You can obviously follow up with us online. We'll make sure we share all of the presentations so you can view the past ones. We'll also share the deck so you can take a look at any of the information that's been put together there. Check us out on matetalks.com. We have another presentation. This time we're throwing another wrench in here in 3 weeks, because 2 weeks from now is 4th of July holiday. So everybody take an extra week off. The last session is really focused on implementation. So it's going to really tie everything together. And we hope you join us then. Thank you, Sravanti. Thank you, Nirmala and Padma. And again, please keep in touch with us throughout this time, and we'll have other sessions as well. So really appreciate everybody joining.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Sorry about the mess up.